We're going to start here in the UK, the COVID inquiry. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was giving evidence about his government's handling of the pandemic. He said that he apologised for the pain and loss and suffering, and that he should have twigged sooner the seriousness of the situation. Well, in the very first minute of Boris Johnson's testimony, he tried to apologise but was interrupted by protesters.
My lady, can I just say how glad I am to be at this inquiry, and how sorry I am for the pain and the loss and the suffering.
Sit down,
of
please. Please stop.
COVID victims.
Please sit down. Please sit down, or I'm afraid you'll have to leave the hearing room. I'm sorry, if you don't sit down, I'm going to ask the ushers to get you to leave.
So then Boris did continue giving his answers to the questions there. Let's speak now to Ruby Lott-Lavinga, a politics reporter for openDemocracy, who's been covering the inquiry. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thanks very much for having me.
So what are some of the main things that we learnt here today?
Well, it's certainly been the biggest day at the inquiry so far. It's certainly been the busiest day at the inquiry so far. The press room was packed. The public viewing room was packed. I know there were people who wanted to get in who couldn't make it in. Today was really a chance for Boris Johnson to defend a lot of the accusations we've heard, a lot of the claims we've heard, that he was dismissive and rude about long COVID, that he didn't think that any of his mistakes led to excess deaths, about the toxicity of government. In terms of what we learned today, potentially not a huge amount, because we have heard a lot of this stuff before, but it was essentially an opportunity for Boris Johnson to stand up and give his perspective on what happened during the pandemic.
And what about, let's take a couple of the things that he did say there. What do you make of the fact that he said he should have just twigged earlier about the seriousness of what was going on?
Yeah, I think this is something, that went back and forth in the inquiry today. He sort of blamed a sort of government-wide attitude to lockdown or the virus in terms of why he locked down late or later than maybe other people thought might have been necessary. He sort of said you don't want to move too quickly on any pandemic. You hear about and you get warned about lots of pandemics, and there was maybe a feeling not to kind of act too quickly. He unsurprisingly blamed certain things on other people. So he said that he wasn't given the scientific advice at the time. That's not necessarily what we've seen during the inquiry. And today we were shown evidence where advice was given and information was given warning about an incoming pandemic. But Johnson essentially maintains that, he was not being informed. And as soon as he saw reports coming from Italy, he acted really quickly. But until then, he wasn't getting the right advice.
Interesting. And he said things like, those mass gatherings at the time should have not gone ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, contentious point that has come up, during, I guess, the period when they were deciding whether to lock down. You had horse racing going on, you had football matches going on. And I think something that's a really sticking point during the inquiry is how much the kind of economic impact needed to be considered against the sort of scientific or human impact, aka people dying. And we will hear more about this certainly when we hear from Rishi